Well, we have 2 more minutes or so. We'll get the meeting started here. All right, well, I'm showing 6 o'clock. Let's go ahead and, you guys can hear me all right, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Peter's not gonna be, at this meeting tonight or even on Zoom. He's having some, family issues, which we all know take priority, so, apologize for that. I apologize for me not being there, but staff felt that, the sooner we address these issues and get them cleared up, that, better for moving forward, so, I already had this trip scheduled out of town, so with that said, Derek, why don't you kind of address, the group and why we're here, and, we'll just take it from there.
Yeah, not a problem, Chris, and thank you for everyone to take their time. I was telling the girls I didn't want to go more than 2 weeks without seeing everyone, so I thought we'd have another meeting. So that's why we're here. No, I spoke with Peter last week, and one thing that I just want to make sure clear, if this is the route we're going, that staff understands that we're starting this process over completely, and everyone's been through it the last 3 months, and that's potentially what we're looking at. And I understand, I think we all understand we need housing. That's not why I called this meeting. One of my main issues is that we're trying to move this project to some property that we purchased last year that we deemed for park improvements. And we passed resolutions, and the reason we bought that was to expand the park. It was not to replace the land that we were gonna build the housing on. And so I just think that needs to be addressed. I'm sure everyone on council is aware of that. I know 3 of us were on council when we passed those resolutions. And then another concern that we had, I know there's a lot of information in our packet, and I understand all of it, but another concern I have is, a few weeks ago when we had a housing authority meeting, we took a poll, and the east side was never brought up. It was never voted on. It was never moved forward on it, and so I don't know how it got on the agenda. So that's my concerns. I just want everyone to understand if this is the route we go on, whether it's 4-3, 5-2, or whatever it is, then the process starts over. And, I think we need to be real careful with our property that we own for the future. I know we're thinking now, and I know we are thinking future, but we lose some of this property, and we tell the public we're buying this property to expand parks, to put in pickleball courts, to put in skate parks, to maybe build field houses one day, and then a year later we turn around and we don't. I just think that's a bad look right now. So I just don't want to, I don't want that to be the message that that's why we bought that property. And that's just what I would like to discuss tonight. So I don't know how you want to follow the agenda, Chris. I know there's some concept stuffs and everything, and we don't even necessarily need to go over those, but we can. I just think we need to understand what the process is now for staff if we do say we're moving forward on the east property, what the timeframes are, what all that looks like, so we have a clear picture before we commit this land and potentially lose it. So I think it's fair to the public to know that if we come out 18 months ago and say we purchased land for this reason, why we're going back on that. So that's the discussion I'd like to have tonight.
Well, there's a lot of information in our packet, and Ryan, do you have anything to add about the purchase and where we're at, or since?
Yeah, I can speak a little on that. You know, that e-site was, the thought behind that was purely the intent for recreation expansion. We just didn't want the park to become landlocked, and it was a good opportunity for us to think of the future of the park in expanding some amenities. That's what I can tell you.
Is Shannon there? I can't see.
Yes, I'm here, Mayor.
Shannon, any background you want to start? Anything adding background here?
I mean, not necessarily on the purchase of the east side property. I don't have.
Yeah,
a lot of
but
background.
how we got to the housing, I think everybody knows the housing needs assessment was done. This site was identified as a top priority. Council, staff actually talked to council about developing that west side. Am I right, Shannon?
Yes, I mean, that's always been my understanding since the west side Woodbury property was identified as the #1 site for housing, that the intent to purchase the east side was, you know, in anticipation of developing the west side for housing. So that was always my understanding.
Right. So where does council want to go with this? Making sure I think in your packet, there is a resolution that we passed when we bought the property. You know, I stated at the last council meeting that we were not going to use the field outside of the outfield, the west site, for parks, right, Ryan? We never included that for development in future plans, correct?
Yeah, it's not on the west side. It's not in the master plan, Chris.
Okay, so when the community spoke up that they wanted that to remain open space and park space, that's when I think staff and Peter and I thought we discussed this at the council meeting, that we rated, the west property further, the west side of, Woodbury Drive, the Woodbury Road. The west lot there that we were just talking about, and the east. So I don't know. What does council want to do on this? Is there any questions for council? Are we going to continue with this site? You know, I just think staff is again, wanting direction.
And I agree, Chris. I want to give staff as much direction as possible, but at that meeting, the direction was not to go east. And I think I rewatched that meeting, and the discussions were those two lots and don't touch the east, because we knew we bought that for park expansion. That's how I took it. So my concern is, we said not to go there, and then it was on the agenda last week or 2 weeks ago to go there.
Okay,
And Chris, that's my memory too. My concern, or going back with it though, is because, yeah, I don't remember discussing the east lot at all at that meeting. But once the west lot is off the property, off the agenda, and we can't get any response from the Chapman property, and DeGroo's evidently have no interest, and I understand why, in the far west property, where does that leave us? That leaves us with nothing. And housing-wise, the rental in particular, we need something soon.
Well, if we're starting
Okay.
over anyway, I'd like to at least look at other properties. I know there was one that was listed, I think it was over by the Candlewood site, but it didn't really get brought up in that meeting, and then we just never touched on that property. but that was also an option.
I would say, Nathan, if you want to have that conversation, I would suggest you reach out to Marlon and just really look at what's available and what the options are. Anything that you look at toward Ridgeview, the problem is usually CDOT access. There's obviously infrastructure issues. I mean, I sat down with Marlon, we went through probably 7 or 8 properties and kind of talked about the pluses and minuses. And so I would recommend you do that because, as a developer, you can't just throw an arrow, a dart at a dartboard and say, okay, we're going to start a housing development here. I mean, like, there's one here off of Highway 40, which would be if you were coming into Craig from the west, that would be on the right-hand side. There's CDOT issues there, there's water and sewer issues there. If you go through what's actually available and what it would take to develop on those sites, there's really not a lot out there when you really start to dig into what it would take for someone to develop on those properties. And if there's a lot of infrastructure, a lot of dirt work, a lot of utility work, it makes it to where it's just cost prohibitive to even be able to build there. So I would say, sit down with Marlon, go through, all of the recommendations that came forward with through the housing assessment study, and just go through site by site with him, and he'll be able to share with you exactly why it works or why it doesn't.
Well, but isn't that the way, those plus and minuses are what the council should be worrying about. That's our role as the city, not putting housing developments on our property. We need to be identifying those utilities and those infrastructure problems we have, and that's our job to fix. It isn't our job to do this, put housing on our park properties. That's just my view. We should be identifying those things that you're talking about, those issues that building west and expanding west. That's the role of the city, not giving up our park land for a housing development. That's.
Even we discussed doing that when Maverick was potentially coming in on the west side, those were discussions we had, and I think that's where the city role fits in. And yeah, as a developer, you can't throw an arrow and land it on a piece of property. I get that, because we've tried to develop some ourselves, but I don't think as a council we can just give up future park space either. And that's, I think the west side, obviously we didn't want to go there. The east side we bought to expand park, and that's something we need to really consider.
I just think it's a change. Like, we went in there with the vision. The vision's changed. We've gotten feedback. We've started at this point, but then the feedback kind of moved us another direction. We were starting with the property we purchased we had a vision. Obviously, that vision had a ways to go because we needed money. So we also have a vision of our town and what is happening, that trying to push that away. Right or wrong, both of us are just trying to do the right thing and try to make something happen. I get it. Like, I think we're all on the same board there, but all being worried and being nervous of what's gonna come. The housing need, how fast houses are still going, which keeps driving prices up, which makes it harder for everybody to be able to afford homes. So what can we do to help that? Is build homes. We have a developer, we have money out there. Like, I don't want to give up park space, but what's the next thing? If this is an attractive location, if this is somewhere which I would see as a developer that I would like, you have a park there, you have all these things that are within a certain area. And now let's think of, what can we do next? Can we buy property elsewhere to entice with park space somewhere else, since we have to give up this? We also weren't even having in our vision the west side.
Maybe
The
we
west
should,
side wasn't even in
we should
vision.
look
now-
do that for housing.
I'm sorry?
So maybe we should look.
Oh, I agree both,
property
but
to
right now
purchase
we
for
have
housing.
somebody willing to put the money, potentially $20 million into our town to build housing that helps the need immediately.
So what are we gonna
The
do when the
longer
next?
we wait,
What about when the next developer comes? Are we gonna give them $2 million? How are we gonna pick the winners and losers in this? At what point do we, we don't ever discuss like helping our community pay for tap fees. We don't discuss putting in streets in certain lots. How are we gonna pick winners and losers every time a new developer comes now? We're setting a precedent.
Well,
Is that, we're gonna have this grant for every developer that comes to Craig?
I don't blame them for wanting to be right on the park. I mean, if the middle of Central Park went up for sale for housing development, it would sell like hotcakes. There'd be developers chomping at the bit for it. That doesn't mean it's the right place to build.
Right.
It's the same case here. You know, we have the nicest park in town. We have a nice space that could be used for recreation. The town has identified recreation as a need. Every day you hear people complaining there's nothing for the kids to do, and then we're gonna give away a huge chunk of what was gonna be park space. I don't think it's appropriate.
Well, and Luke, in response to that,
Yeah.
we've had developers look at various things, and none of them have been interested, even with those
Different
type of.
timing, time changes
those type of
everything.
things. And it
Brand.
does.
I mean, we know what's happening up valley right now, and I think private money is gonna come down this valley. And that's the thing, is I'm not gonna stop any private developer to come in and doing his own thing on a lot with his own money. Like, that's the American way. He's taking his own risks, but then we're bringing taxpayer dollars into it now.
Yeah.
And I think that's a little questionable.
I
So,
mean, taxpayer dollars, when you talk about the land, I get, but,
it's taxpayer dollars, grant dollars, tax dollars.
oh, of course.
Yeah.
Federally, right? You're bringing them in there. We're still.
Matching, we're matching.
I totally understand, you know, but that's what people also say when you're trying to bring in a developer, is how do you entice them? You entice them with different opportunity. What is infrastructure that you keep continuing to talk?
I think
What are we
demand
gonna
will
do?
drive
We're
it.
gonna spend taxpayer dollars in infrastructure wherever we go. So either way, you know, whether the money comes local or further away, you know, it's a help. I'm not saying that you're trying to use these dollars wisely. And we want a developer that's gonna be doing all the work themselves, which that's basically what they're doing. All we're offering is some land and some grant money and our help. And then we have all these other options that's gonna help us later on, which is being able to, whether or not, you know, keep them in line somewhat with how they take care of the property down the line. They're just nice things to have when we're trying to do this. Because I don't want us to get into buying housing like we are all the time. I don't want that. But that's why this project seems even better, is because we are not really doing that. We're kind of just being the guy there helping them, giving them a little bit here or there. And
Is
that's
it-
what we're
Is it
doing.
wise to give our park space away, though?
Yeah.
Like, it's wise to invest in infrastructure. I understand that. Everyone does that. That's an incentive.
sure.
But is it wise to say, go take this lot that maybe 10 years from now, when we, there's nowhere for kids to play sports right now,
Yeah.
inside. So, as soon as we build on that, now what? Now we're gonna go buy land somewhere? When we have land at the park
Ready to go, right there.
for park?
We've already
I get it.
identified as
Yeah.
developable for that
I
purpose.
understand that.
So, I just don't think that's a wise
As opposed to
decision.
With a rec building, that would be awesome to be there. I get it. But right now, we have a lot of other needs that are coming our way. And to think that a rec center, with what's happening, is gonna come in here anytime soon, so how long we just gonna sit on the property, you know? And I get it, I would love one, I've always wanted one, but I think it should have been built 15, 20 years ago, and
I
then we
agree.
wouldn't be dealing with
I just
that.
think we need to look at building stuff to retain the citizens. We're trying to attract citizens, but we also need to
course.
build to retain citizens as well. And,
Yes,
you know,
Gotta
we're
be an
so,
attractive place to live.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah,
I could argue that we could build a field house next year. I mean, just the cost, we could look into grants for that. That actually benefits our taxpayers without, I mean, this is a private company coming in here that's gonna make a
Yeah.
lot of money, you know, and
for sure.
so I could argue that we could build a field house for $4 or $5 million and start that process, you know, I mean, that's something to talk
Luke,
about.
I agree, and I can argue with that, and just like with you guys with the park space. I agree with that too, but if we don't have people coming in 5 to 6 years, because we don't have housing, what's the point of having
Bigger
a
issue,
park?
Randy, is that I guess that there's no other buildable lot in Craig, Colorado. That's our problem. That's city council's problem. Not that this one lot is our only developable lot in Craig. Is that what I'm hearing? I mean, that's very concerning. Our $2 million grant should be going to fix that problem, you know? So that's what we should be addressing. Like if city council's vision is to expand west. Why have we not been talking about fixing these issues? Instead, we're talking about giving up the only buildable lot in Craig, Colorado. That's worrisome. I mean, so, I mean, that's where I want to see our tax dollars going, is to fix that problem. This one development, and these, I think, I appreciate Dragoo's. I think, and I would love them to come and just do it on their own somewhere. I don't want them to touch our park space. That's the only issue I have with this whole thing, you know? So, I mean, I'm very concerned that we don't have another buildable lot in Craig, Colorado. And if $2 million will fix that, why don't we use that $2 million to fix that?
Sure. I can speak to two lots, one of those being the Carpenter property, which is on the opposite side of Mac Lane. I know I myself have tried to reach out to those owners, and I know the real estate office here that the city was working with has tried to reach out to them. We've not had any luck so far getting someone to return a phone call or an email, or whether or not they've responded to a certified letter, I'm not sure. But I mean, I literally myself have picked up the phone and tried to make contact with the registered agent, who is also, it looks like, the vice president of that company. So that is certainly an available land, but whether or not they're willing to sell it remains to be seen at this point. And then the land, the 6 acres that's on the west side of Woodbury Drive, I think that certainly could be an option. And I think the Dragoo's, when I spoke with Doug, his hesitation on that is obviously it's kind of the same problems, right? You have plenty of land there, you have access onto First Street, but it still drives people onto Woodbury Drive, it still drives traffic onto Doyen, and it still backs up to Woodbury subdivision. So are they gonna then meet that same resistance from that community if we're basically we're moving across the street and we're not in open space? But I mean, the same potential problems are there, and I think that was the Dragoo's concern was, are we going to meet the same resistance and have some of the same struggles and issues? So of those 2 properties, that's where we're at with those. And then, like I said, I mean, I would say sit down with Marlon and go through every piece of the 17 properties that were determined through that housing assessment study. It's not that there's not land there, but some things work better for single-family development, not multifamily development. Or, again, the access for CDOT. I mean, I think we know the length of time it can take to try to get those access if you're on CDOT access. So, I mean, there's just a lot of issues that come along with every piece of property, and I don't disagree with you, and maybe that's where the city can help and benefit, a number of developers. But I just think it's not like we have this wealth of property that someone can just go, in the next 60 or 90 days or even a year and just build on easily.
Yeah, and I'm just concerned we're just so focused on this one project, we're not focused on the big picture, like we're saying, other development out to the west,
Okay.
wherever. Go ahead,
Can I
Chris.
get in here for a minute?
Yep.
Real quick. Sorry, guys. So let me just address a couple of little things here. So the comment was made, why don't we take these grant dollars and move them to do infrastructure other parts of town? These grant dollars are more housing now, grant dollars. They were awarded to the city from the standpoint of using them to build housing and the infrastructure that is required. $2 million or 1.9, whatever it is just a horizontal infrastructure on the lot. Luckily, we're not extending utilities from any length of, distance to get to the property. So that money is not transferable to put water and sewer to wherever else, number one. Number two, the city has been working with every developer that has even called the city to ask what's going on, or, following up with every lead they can. But once the developers start getting and looking at these properties and looking at the costs, none of them have moved forward with the city at this point. We had a developer who was going to do 140 home sites out there by Pine Ridge. Once they started crunching the numbers, no, it did not work.
No, but Chris, we weren't giving them the land. We weren't.
Well, we didn't own the land.
I know, that's what I'm saying. If you asked any of those developers if they wanted to come in and give them land, they would all say yes.
The city was going to pay to run sewer to that part of that property that they could run sewer to as the city working with that developer. And that developer still, could not make the numbers work. So, any of these housing projects that you can see being built in Steamboat and Hayden and everywhere else, there are a joint private and public and private, working together to make these things happen. We could move, Nathan, I said, I think said, why aren't we looking at the site out there by Candlewood Suite? Pretty simple. We don't have a developer for that site. If you have a developer, bring them in. Shannon, I'm sure we'll talk to him. And Peter, I'm sure we'll talk to him. So, we're bouncing a lot of things out off there that are irrelevant at this point. Okay, if you guys want this field house, build it on that west lot. There's no other plans for that west lot. Put your field house there. Okay? Only reason we went to the east side because we thought that was developable. So, I don't care what we do. At this point, I just want to give staff a direction. So, council, we can't take action at a workshop, but I think we can get a consensus moving forward, right, Heather? I think Heather's there, right?
I'm here. I mean, I think obviously staff can discern where the majority lies. I don't even know that you need to take a consensus necessarily.
Luke, I will speak. I understand the city property, that's a different aspect. But as far as the grants go, typically most of the grant money out there is tied to a specific project. They don't like to give as much just for speculation, like, hey, we might develop this in 10, you know what I mean, whether it's next year or 10 years. And those grants, as far as setting a precedence, we do have in our ordinances, the requirements you have to meet for those, which all fall under workforce, affordable housing. So there's requirements, and so if a local developer or smaller developer or whatever does come and meets those same requirements, obviously we have things on the table there, and the grants are specific.
I understand that this grant is not for our infrastructure in other places. That was.
And I mean
taken in
future
the
grants and
wrong way.
stuff,
Yeah.
and so that's the only thing. But yeah, I agree. Yeah, there is some areas. It gets tricky then because it's.
Sounds like you have the areas identified that we need to work on, from what Andrew is explaining. I mean.
Some of
in
them
the
are
big scheme of
proximity to other
things.
places
If
and
it's
stuff.
if it's the size of line or whatever we need to do, those are the things that I'd rather council be looking at.
And we are working on some of that stuff.
Good.
Yeah, CDOT and stuff, that's a whole different animal when it comes to the west end of town, but as far as infrastructure
Yeah.
and stuff, you're right.
But if we're gonna grow it and we want people to come in, that we're gonna have to tackle that at some point. And I just think we had a consensus a month ago to not go to the east, and now we're asking a consensus to go to the east, so that's just where I'm getting.
Well, and you had a
confused.
consensus, we had resolutions last year saying that we were gonna build park there. I mean,
Right, but we also had resolutions that we were gonna build housing on the west side that changed because of the backlash. My concern with the east side, and that's my concern now, whether I'm in favor of it or not, what's gonna happen when 5 months from now, a different crowd, but the same type thing comes and says, no, we don't want it there because we want the parks, and they have a good
I see
argument.
that, yeah.
I mean.
That's what we're concerned about, is we're gonna,
That's already
we're
happened.
gonna waste staff's time
Right.
working for a year, and then we're gonna do the same thing to them again. So,
That's already happening. I saw a poll on one of our pages today that had 200 people voted on it, and they were like, do not use the park space. It's a small poll, but the fact that it's already circulating, it's already starting to get negative attention, I don't think it's something we want to touch.
And I think going back to what Chris's question, you can have your discussion. I think staff will be able to glean, who sits where. I think that the problems have arose because you have one thing happening at one meeting, right? And then you have another idea happening in another meeting. It would probably be a good idea if you think there's going to be a change of direction to put it back on and have a revote so everybody is clear on what we're doing. Because I think that there's a lot of lines going out from one question and we're kind of losing sight of the question, and then everybody's getting on 5 different pages where we're trying to be on one. So it might just help staff have some resolution, as well as council to know this is absolutely the direction that this is headed. I know in my conversations with the mayor and then Derek and Luke, I think the concern was, did everybody have a full understanding that when we purchased this last year, it was purchased primarily to develop the park? And I think that's where the concern started. And so maybe there was a concern at last meeting that not everybody was aware of that. Not everybody maybe was aware that we would have to, my understanding is, pay back that conservation trust that the property was purchased with for the $160,000. And so the city at that point would be directly funding the purchase of that park. And so that's what my understanding of this workshop was. But if there is potentially going to be a change in direction to staff, it probably would be helpful to have it on the next agenda. So there's a hard answer for them of what they're doing or not doing.
Thank you, Heather.
Sure.
For bringing us back to a point. So, I take exception with understanding we had to reimburse that. We discussed that at the last council meeting before we took a vote, that we had to reimburse the trust fund. I even asked Ryan for the name of it. So I guess we can vote till we get this right. I don't know what council wanted to do. We started the council meeting last time saying we need to give staff a direction and vote as a unit and as one. So, if you guys think we need to put it back on the agenda, we can discuss it more. But I'm open, so.
I just, yeah, and I was one that said that. I said, we need to give staff direction and I'll learn to move forward with it if that's the discussion. But I think we also need to take into account that, we're setting staff up for another long year of what we just went through. And I think we need to take that into consideration. I really do. And, we're elected to make these decisions, but also, when they're this close and this tight and we're straining staff, then in my opinion, at some point you can say, maybe this isn't a win-win for us, let's take a step back and keep and look elsewhere. And I just want staff to understand that this is starting all over, and I think they know that. And we haven't really even asked them what they think, but we're just telling them. And so.
All right, so I guess the reason for this meeting, as Heather just pointed out, was to make sure council was aware of 2 items. That we did, the resolution did say for recreation purposes. And previous councils, Heather, correct me, cannot bound future councils, correct, for action?
That's correct. So if you as a council decided you wanted to utilize that portion for residential, high-density residential housing, then certainly this council has the ability to do that. It would require a new resolution to address the payback of that conservation trust fund and for the use of that portion of land, as well as it would, have a zoning element as well. So.
Well, and what does it say that, how can the community trust council when we make a purchase a year ago and already are changing our minds? I think that's concerning. That, and then there is a handful that was on council last year that made these resolutions. Like, where does that leave us with the community?
Again, I agree with.
We were well into the discussion of that west, as I stated at last council, that the west property would have been used for this housing development. January, we even signed a non-binding letter of intent with this developer to use that west property. Now, since the community has spoken that they wanted that property to remain open park, then that's why we moved on to another piece of property. We did say we would research other properties, which we have. and to no avail. The only one that the developer's halfway interested in is the Carpenter's property, but we can't get an answer. So,
Did we offer to buy the other properties though? Because I feel like that might make a difference with the Dragoos, because in their, I think it was a second meeting they had when I was there, they said they'd be open to other properties, but they wanted us to be involved as well by giving them property, and that was a part of the deal. So if we're
And
not,
that's
if we're not
all
offering to do that on these other sites, then
private partnership, yes.
did we offer to do that for any of these other options?
Is that required, Shannon, that we own the property, or is that, or can we use this grant on a property that Dragoos purchase and then?
Again, we haven't gone to DOLA yet because we want to have a site identified, but it's something we'd have to ask of them. Really, I think the only stipulations is that the grant be utilized for public infrastructure, so that way, if they did own the property, at some point, they'd probably have to deed it back to the city, so that way the infrastructure could remain public and we could utilize the grant.
There's possible options. I mean, we don't know. I guess we don't have any idea right now, but.
Right, yeah.
Okay.
And we haven't discussed in detail potentially like having the city purchase a site and go that route.
But there'd be a route where Dragoos could possibly purchase, deed it to us, and then we can use the grant. I mean, there are scenarios out there.
Right, yeah.
There's areas out there for any developer to purchase if they want to, if it's feasible and it works into their cost of their development. So, all right, council, does everybody understand where we're at then and what the requirements were on this parcel and what we will need to do if we continue directing staff what to do here?
Yes.
Yes.
Yep.
Randy, yep.
Yes.
Who else I have? Jesse, you know, right?
Yes.
Andrea, you know, right? Yes. And I guess Ryan and Luke, you know, correct?
Yes.
Derek,
Nathan, you know, correct?
Yes.
might just need to build a bigger council chambers. I'm aware of
Okay.
it, Chris, thank you.
Anything else we need to discuss? Heather, do you think this addresses that?
So I think, one thing would be a good, if you guys want to put it on the
Yes.
agenda again to readdress, I think that's kind of the outstanding question now that everybody, has all of the information. If you want it on the next agenda, or if you want staff to continue with the direction they were given last time.
And just so for Marlon and Shannon, if it does go back, or if it doesn't go on back on the agenda, either way, this will start over with planning and zoning, with public hearings, site plan, all that.
Yeah, everything would start over. Granted, a lot of feasibility stuff like we did last year would have to take place first before but we are not gonna take something if we don't feel like it's gonna, if there's reasons it physically won't work. I mean, not that we have every engineered thing out just for a rezone, but I mean, at least a pretty good feasibility of making sure it'll work. So we wouldn't go immediately, because if we were gonna use some of that for pickleball courts, parking, park amenities, then there would have to be a replat done, so we'd be back to kinda like we were on the other one, making sure stuff was replatted so it'd be zoned correctly and everything.
So I guess the potential plan for the skate park and pickleball there and grants that you were gonna go after for that next year, you probably won't be going after
Yeah.
until you.
Pause. No, on that note, didn't we mention that there was some potential excavation that would need to happen on that west site in relation to the pipes and everything else going on over there? If we're doing that with the skate park, if you're already excavating, two birds, one stone, if you're already gonna have to dig it up, you're digging it up for a skate park either way. That might be a good location to shift that to. And then I'm sure there's room over there for pickleball as well, if you're there's room for 120 units of houses. I'm sure there's room for pickleball and some skate park over in that area.
And just a reminder, the new East Side concept, even though it's not 100% fleshed out, the developers are willing to put in pickleball courts and pursue grant funding to pay for those. So that was, somewhat of a compromise we felt in that, hey, we understand that this is park space, but while we have a developer here, we have them on the hook, let's see if they'd be willing to help pay for some of the original park plan amenities, which they were amenable to. So that would leave us with maybe skate park and parking on the west side, so.
Well, council, we have staff in the room tonight, and thank you, staff, for showing up. To answer any further questions you have about the east side, and I guess I need to know if we're gonna re-vote on this, or if you guys would like to see this up again. You folks, not you guys. Sorry, Andrea.
Maybe I'm the only one. I was kind of under the impression if we were voting on do we want to move on from this site at all? Or continue to pursue it in addition to other sites? Not, do we want to continue to pursue this and only this site? Maybe that was just me, but that was kind of the way I took it. It was just more of a direction of, did we want to get this off the table or not? Not necessarily, do we want this to be the site?
Well, my understanding was, we voted to take the west side completely off the table. And we voted on this one to continue the process of working with the developer and all the steps it would take to rezone, do all the environmental studies and civil work, all of that as well. But the first big hurdle would be the rezoning of the property from light industrial to residential high density, right, Marlon?
Yes, for that particular lot, since we would be maybe separating it a little bit for some of the recreational as well. Yes.
Right, true.
Would it be crazy, since this is gonna be a long, drawn-out process again, would it be crazy to take it to the voters?
I don't have a major problem with that, honestly, because council is pretty well split down the middle, on this. The only problem is that'll be November and
I agree.
we won't start all the rezoning. So by the time we get the soils and everything done, we're into next summer probably. And it's gonna push the project to what, 28? So I don't know. You saw Peter's estimation, construction time is 18 to 24 months. A lot of environmental stuff, 4 to 6 months. So
I mean, I'd
my only problem.
be fine with the voters, or I'd be fine us addressing it again, just because I wasn't aware of the resolutions and different things that were made. I think it matters.
And I would have to check the grant, like when we have to spend the money by. I'm sure we could get extensions if we needed to, but I just need to check and see what those dates are.
Right.
I would like to see it come back on council's agenda and not wait for a vote of the community, only because I feel like if this isn't going to be an option, there are other options that the DeGrues could pursue, and whether that's them buying it and donating it back to the city if that's an option or something. But I think at least it gives them an opportunity, should they want to continue, to be able to do that in a timely manner, so.
Have we asked the Dragoos that question?
About,
If there's a land that they would be willing to purchase and deed back for
Well-
this work? Has that
actually,
happened?
yes. So if you look at the Woodbury Housing Project timeline, early on when they came up and did a site visit, like back in April of last year, we actually visited the old courthouse site, or where the former courthouse site is about to be demolished. We visited the Centennial Mall. They actually were going to put an offer in on the mall, but there was already an offer on the mall that fell through. I took them, of course, by the two downtown properties, the Spicy Basil and Golden Cavy, just as investment properties. They did wind up buying the Old Bank of the West building, and then, of course, I took them by both of the Woodbury properties. So initially, yes, we were looking at other sites and seeing if those were options. Really, our focus has been on the sites that have been identified in the needs assessment. So, of course, just continuing to pursue the Carpenter property, the 6-acre industrial lot. I don't know if they looked at any of the single-family residential opportunities, like up by the hospital, school, any of that, but we've certainly explored other opportunities, so.
But you're not aware of anything since this discussion has happened in the last 2 months?
For
For them saying, okay, the city might not give us this land, we're out looking elsewhere. Because that's got to be in the back of their head also.
Right,
We're
right.
Going down this road again, and they might put money in and do the same thing. So I just was curious if that question's been asked.
I mean, I think it's always an option. I think their whole rationale behind the Woodbury sites, or specifically the west side initially, was it being identified as the top site in the needs assessment, us being able to justify and gain the grant funding. So I just don't know if they're willing to purchase property. I don't know. We haven't gotten that far in the discussions. I don't think it's completely off the table, but obviously they'd rather have something like this where it's ready to go. But
Sure, most of it.
And then again, the.
well, it hasn't just fallen in our lap. It's been a lot of work.
And then, so, yeah, we lose the grant, so, because it's for public infrastructure that the city owns. Because we would continue owning those lots, so. So. All right, so do we want to discuss this one again at council?
Yes.
Who's yes? Luke?
Yep.
Eric is yes?
Yes.
Brandy?
Yes.
Andrea? Nathan?
Yes.
Jesse? Yes. Okay, I'll put it on the agenda for next council. Anything else? I guess, we're done then. Derek, you're good?
I'm good, Chris. Thank you.
Luke, you're good?
Good. Thanks.
Okay. Meeting's adjourned. Thank you again, staff, for showing up, and council. Okay?
Chris?
Thanks.
Yeah, no, good.